300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad to have you with me on a Monday morning. A lot to unpack in the NBA playoffs, from the Western Conference game on Saturday night between the Clippers and the Suns. That was an absolute classic brawl. And last night, between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks, some big news out of Portland. Not only is Chauncey Billups the new head coach, but what about Damian Lillard and his future in Portland? Does he want out? I'm going to touch on that. And I'm even going to preview the Stanley Cup Finals that is starting tonight with Game 1. So a lot to get into today, but I will start with the playoff game that took place last night between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks. The Bucks outlasted the Hawks in Game 3 on the road at State Farm Arena, 113-102, behind 38 points from Khris Middleton. The Bucks have now taken a 2-1 series lead in this Eastern Conference Finals. They're 2 games away from reaching the NBA Finals. And in life, there are always consistent themes and traits amongst the most successful people. No matter what walk of life you're in, there's always something consistent that is kind of universal amongst every single person, every single thing that is a great success, right? Typically, the most successful people are never the ones that are just productive for 1 month or 1 week, or they revolutionize one thing. They are consistently great at what they do. They are constantly innovative, constantly answering the call when they're called upon. You can look at music. There are many examples of one-hit wonders when it comes to musicians. The Tokens, 1960, came out with The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Everyone's used to hearing that song in the remake version in the movie The Lion King. That was a huge success. The Tokens never came out with anything else that was nearly as successful as that. Steam in 1969 came out with Na 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 Hey 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 Goodbye. That was it. That was the only song that they have. Apologies if you didn't like my own rendition and spin on that song right there. That was the only successful song that they had. The Macarena. That was the only song that artist came out with. It was a big success. There are a lot of one-hit wonders, but when you look at the most successful musicians, they delivered multiple songs. They composed multiple sheets of music. Beethoven isn't just known for one symphony. He composed a number of symphonies. Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Beyonce. They deliver consistent hits. They're not just one-hit wonders. And the same thing applies to technology. Apple didn't just revolutionize technology with the MacBook and with the computer, their version of it. They continue to refine it, but they came out with the iPhone, the iPad. They're constantly innovating. Elon Musk didn't just create PayPal. He said, hey, I'm going to top PayPal, and I'm going to create an electric car in Tesla, and I'm going to create reusable rockets and try and commercialize flights to space with his company SpaceX. These are revolutionary, innovative people that do more than one thing. And the same thing applies to sports. The greatest athletes of all time didn't just deliver in one postseason, didn't just deliver for one game. Tom Brady, LeBron, Michael Jordan, Kobe, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, Wayne Gretzky, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo. These guys have delivered time and time again magical virtuoso performances. That's what's made them great. And when we look at the Milwaukee Bucks, the one thing that we've always said, the reason why they've experienced these shortcomings in previous postseasons, especially over the last 4 years when they've been highly touted and have had all these expectations, was that they were never consistent enough in the postseason. And specifically, we falsely accused one guy of being inconsistent. We always attributed all the lack of success and the disappointments to Giannis Antetokounmpo, but the reality is it was never about just Giannis. Giannis was not just the guy. If you really look at Giannis and you're objective about him, Giannis has actually been one of the more bright spots for the Milwaukee Bucks in their previous postseasons. This is a guy who, by the way, just dropped a casual 33 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists yesterday. And in this postseason this year, he's averaging 29 points, 13.5 rebounds, 4 assists on 54% shooting. Over the last four postseasons, during this high stretch of great basketball for the Milwaukee Bucks when Giannis won back-to-back MVPs, he averaged 28 points per game, 12 rebounds, 5.5 assists on 56% shooting over the past 4 seasons. It was never about Giannis. Sure, we'd like him to do more, and that's valid. And there are moments when he's missed a crucial free throw, or we want to see him be able to shoot a jump shot a little bit more effectively and efficiently. But the reality is, Giannis has been productive and has been contributing. No, the reason why the Bucks have come up short in recent seasons is because of Khris Middleton. Khris Middleton has epitomized what it means to ride a roller coaster of emotions, these ebbs and flows of performances. Khris Middleton is that X factor. Is he truly a number 2? Yesterday, he dropped a playoff career high, 38 points. He outscored the Atlanta Hawks 20-17 in the fourth quarter. These are the types of performances that have been needed for the Milwaukee Bucks to advance. This has been the biggest question mark. Were they going to get consistent performances out of Khris Middleton? And the problem is, this postseason, while he has been producing better numbers statistically, 22 points per game, 8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, but his percentages are still lower than they were in the regular season. He's shooting 42% from the floor, 34% from the three-point line, which those field goal percentages have dropped significantly in the postseason. But with that being said, this has been, relative to his previous postseasons, the most consistent postseason that he has had for Khris Middleton. He has scored 25-plus points in a game 5 times this postseason. He scored at least 30 or more points 3 times in this postseason, which, again, given the massive contract that he signed, given that he's been an all-star a couple times, obviously being paid like it, you would expect to see those types of performances. But he's a very good basketball player that hasn't always been consistent. And now we're starting to see a little bit more consistency. Again, not enough to automatically crown them as a champion. Middleton scored 15 points in games 1 and 2. He scored more points in the fourth quarter yesterday than he scored in the first 2 games of the Eastern Conference Finals at home. So this game was on the road. And the telling stat is this: when Khris Middleton shoots better than 40%, and he shot 15 of 26 yesterday, 6 of 12 from 3. When Khris Middleton shoots 40% or better from the floor, the Milwaukee Bucks are 9-0 in this postseason. When he shoots below that, they're 1-4. So I understand all the criticism that can be heaped in the direction of Giannis for not being able to shoot from the outside, all of those are valid. But at the end of the day, it's never about Giannis. Giannis actually produces and is one of the more consistent players. We just expect, because he's averaging 30 and 11, that we expect him to take it up in another notch and start averaging 40 and 15. No, the guy is a walking 30-point per game and 10 to 12 rebound per game guy. It's about Khris Middleton and some of these other players doing what they're supposed to do. Yesterday, we got that, which is why they won the game. So when you look at this matchup and then you shift it to the Atlanta Hawks and you say, well, they came out of the gates aggressive, confidently. They jumped out to a 13-point lead in the first quarter. They jumped out to a major lead in the opening quarter, 7-0 run to start the game. They even led 95-88 with 7:32 remaining in the fourth quarter. This is a really good Atlanta Hawks team, a really confident Atlanta Hawks team. And it was Khris Middleton after at that moment when they're down 95-88, he sparks a 25-9 run and an even briefer 15-3 run. So all this talk about it's got to be Giannis, it's got to be Giannis. No, Giannis will step up. He will be there when you need him. He has shown that. Again, as far as the production, he is there. It all comes down, it all boils down, though, to Khris Middleton. Will Khris Middleton play like he's supposed to? And this postseason, he's been a little bit more consistent, which has been the biggest difference. He's the biggest X factor. The Bucks are primed to win not only this series, but an NBA championship. I mean, they are way better than the Atlanta Hawks. On paper, their roster is better than the Atlanta Hawks. They've got so much more star power than the Atlanta Hawks. But at the end of the day, you've got a guy in Trae Young who drops 35 points. And really, he scored 32 points midway or nearly through the end of the third quarter. And then, unfortunately, stepped on the foot of the sideline official, which was just really, again, unfortunate to see, because I would have loved to have seen what the outcome of that game would have been if he wasn't hobbled and compromised. Now he's got a tweaked ankle, and it's just a shame that it slowed him down because, again, injuries perhaps are determining the outcome of yet another series. So everything is coming together and coalescing for the Milwaukee Bucks right now to make a great run. They are having every single break go their way. They're getting enough consistent performances out of their good players. Bobby Portis chipped in with about 18 points yesterday. He was really good. So, and if you're Sean Wright, you're the official, get out of the way, man. Because now you might have just cost the Atlanta Hawks a chance at taking a lead in this series and making some more noise, which they've already done. So it's a little bit of deja vu for the Atlanta Hawks. They were in this position against the 76ers in the previous round where they split on the road. They took the opening game of the series on the road. Then they came back home, lost the first one at State Farm Arena to trail 2-1. But this feels different because they had a healthy Trae Young back then. Now everything's completely different when you've got your star player perhaps unable to play at 100% with an ankle, when what creates his mismatches, what makes him so good, is his ability to blow by defenders using his speed. So if he can't do that, he might be forced to stay out on the perimeter and try and do most of his damage down there. So that's the big thing. When he's healthy, he's a star, and this team goes as far as he takes them. And if he's injured, then that might be the end of the series. But again, this was about Khris Middleton stepping up and the Milwaukee Bucks finding some semblance of consistency that they needed to close out this win in Game 3. Shifting to the Western Conference Finals, Game 4 took place at Staples Center between the Phoenix Suns and the LA Clippers. This was a classic bar fight, just a grueling slugfest and just a grudge match. It was brutal. It was physical. The defensive pressure and intensity was there. Neither team could shoot the ball well at all. The Suns shot 36% from the floor, 20% from three. The Clippers shot 33% from the floor, 16% from the three-point line. Suns made 4 threes, Clippers made 5. And to start the fourth quarter, there were only 6 field goals made. No, 6 points made. 2 field goals made, 6 points made through the first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. There was a stretch where both teams missed 16 consecutive shots. Clippers were 0 for 12 on opportunities to either tie or take the lead in the fourth quarter, which is the most according to stats in the past 25 years. This was gruesome, just brute force, and it was just a matter of whose will is stronger, because neither team could shoot it at all. There was no consistency with this ball game. It was 52-36 at the halftime, and then the Suns outscored the Clippers in the fourth quarter 15-14. It culminated with 29 total points in the fourth quarter. But this is what's important. What's important was that there was a lot at stake in this game for both teams. You could feel it. The Suns were trying to reach the NBA Finals. They're trying to take command of this series and reach the NBA Finals for the first time since 1993. Chris Paul, of course, the narrative around him, he's trying to reach his first ever NBA Finals. And the Clippers are trying to come back from an 0-2 deficit for the third time this postseason. They already reached history. They already made history reaching the Western Conference Finals for the first time in their franchise's history. And in a series like this, where you've got the possibility of tying this series up and going back to Phoenix in a best-of-3 scenario with a chance to go to the NBA Finals, the Clippers are probably looking at themselves saying, we can still win this if we win this game, game 4 at home. So there's all this, that's hanging in the backdrop, all this exerted pressure. And Staples Center felt like a pressure cooker on Saturday night. There was the stress and the anxiety level was palpable. Even through the television set watching this game, you could just see that both teams were tightening up. As I mentioned, 16 consecutive misses in the fourth quarter. Clippers were 0 for 12 during that stretch, the longest stretch of misses in 25 years. Neither team could shoot it in the fourth quarter. 15-14. The Suns outscored the Clippers in the fourth quarter. So backs were a little bit tight. The tension was building up and was percolating and boiling over. And you could feel that in the arena. The anxiety, both teams understanding the magnitude of this moment, which contributed to why neither team could make a shot. And yet, when the game had more of its rhythm, had more of its flow, that's when the Phoenix Suns jumped out to a 16-point lead. They played with pace. And then the Clippers, as they've been prone to do to start the third quarter, they outscore the Suns 30-19, which they've been prone to do, making those halftime adjustments. And they kind of mucked up the game. And they turned it into that grudge match, into that absolute dogfight. That's the style of play that they've had the most success with. And every postseason, we always see different NBA players emerge and make a name for themselves. Last year, of course, Jamal Murray in the bubble had a tremendous postseason and really kind of staked his name in those NBA elite circles. This year, we've seen Devin Booker do it. Trae Young have some magical performances. But at the end of the day, the most consistent player for the Phoenix Suns and the best player last night was DeAndre Ayton. I'm going to say it again. I talked about last week how he's becoming the next Hakeem Olajuwon. He's got the potential to be there. 19 points, a career high, 20 to a career playoff high, 22 rebounds to go along with 4 blocks. 18 of 24 from the floor, was efficient. This postseason, and this is something that I've always talked about when I've been trying to dissect and explicate the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker is their best and most talented player. There's no question about that. Chris Paul is their most important player who they need to win a championship. But DeAndre Ayton has been their most consistent player. This is a guy this postseason averaging 16.5 points, 11.4 rebounds, a block a game on 71% shooting. The guy is money right around the rim. He does not miss. And when he hit that turnaround fadeaway from the baseline over Zubac in the third quarter, that was a beautiful jump shot for a legit 7-footer who's not KD, who plays with his back to the basket, but can hit the mid-range shot when called upon. DeAndre Ayton was absolutely sensational. And what's more important about him is not just the confidence that he plays with, but it's the fact that he plays within himself. You never see him trying to force the issue, trying to necessarily actively assert himself. He plays within the game. He lets the game come to him. He doesn't force up shots. He's not pressing. He's just efficient and delivers when he's called upon. And that's what's made him so spectacular and such an underrated piece of this team, is he truly has been the anchor this postseason. He's played in every game. He's been the most consistent. He's been durable. And his impact extends through every single series that they've been in. The only 3 games that the Phoenix Suns have lost this postseason are when DeAndre Ayton is outplayed or allows the opposing big to have a monster game. 2 games they lost against the Lakers. Anthony Davis in those 2 games averaged 34 points, 10.5 rebounds. In the 1 game that they lost to the Clippers in Game 3, Zubac had 15 points and 16 rebounds. With the exception of those 3 games, he's done a really good job mitigating the damage by Jokic and any of the other bigs that were playing in those previous games. He would always be more dominant, which is why they'd win these basketball games. So, again, the ending of the game was obviously very emotional. There were a couple close calls. I think that last call with about 7.8 seconds left, when Batum is defending Cameron Payne, it looked like the ball knocked off of Cameron Payne. They did not review it. That would have given the Clippers the ball back, down by 1. So there's no question that would have been a huge monumental call, and I understand why Clippers fans were probably upset about that. But this was more about the Phoenix Suns once again checking another box off the list in pursuit of a championship title. Having to battle through this adversity was extremely, extremely impressive for them. Now, I will say this. I will admit, the Clippers have earned my respect this postseason. They have been extremely impressive. The fight, the resiliency, the grit, the toughness that they've played with and they've demonstrated throughout this postseason. Now they're playing 13 games in 25 days, making no excuses. They have to win on the road in Dallas 3 times to keep their season alive. They had to go to Utah in Game 5 on the road without Kawhi and win, and close out that series in Game 6 at home. And then against the Phoenix Suns here, right from the jump in Game 1, they're putting up a strong fight. The fortitude that this team had apparently lacked in years past, they've got it now, and they've been showing it. And they've been extreme. It is extremely commendable, the job that the Clippers have done, undermanned, outgunned, and yet they're right there in the thick of it till the very end. No excuses. Reggie Jackson has been spectacular this postseason for the Clippers. He's been averaging 21.5 points in the Western Conference Finals, over 18 points per game this postseason. He has filled in admirably for Kawhi Leonard. He has been increasing his production since Kawhi Leonard has gone down. 22 points in Game 5 against the Jazz on the road, 27 in Game 6 at home to close out that series. Obviously, Terrence Mann stepped up with 39 points in that game. And this team, again, finally we're seeing the chemistry. And this is the team that kind of is reminiscent of the Clippers team that people liked just 2 years ago before Paul George and Kawhi Leonard arrived. They were a really scrappy group with Lou Williams and Patrick Beverley and Montrezl Harrell and Zubats and Gallinari. This was a Clippers team that people really rooted for because they showed that scrappiness, because they weren't favored and they played a physical, defensive-oriented style of basketball that kept them in ball games. And they were extremely likable. And this Clippers team, even though I'm a Lakers fan, I have to admit that they've earned my respect this postseason. Now, unfortunately, as great as Paul George has been this postseason, especially compared to the postseasons he's had in the past, Paul George still needs to step up down the stretch. It's unfortunate that the game has come down to free throws sometimes, and he has missed a number of crucial free throws. It happened again in Game 4. He was 12 for 18 from the free throw line. Now, I know 2 of those free throws were intentional misses, but he still missed some big-time free throws with opportunities to tie the game or make it just a one-point game down the stretch, and he would miss. And as good as he's been, again, he's been averaging 26.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, 6 assists this postseason. And in the conference finals, he's been averaging similar numbers, but his field goal percentage has been poor, and especially at the free throw line late. And that's unfortunately been the Achilles heel of the Clippers this postseason is their inability to complete games, to finish games down the stretch. And this is what leads to my final gripe that I will say. Kawhi Leonard, he's sitting up in the box suite at Staples Center. What the hell is Kawhi Leonard doing up at the suite as opposed to being on the bench with his teammates? I did not like that at all. I thought that was embarrassing and shameful on his end. Again, I understand we don't know the extent of his injury. They're intentionally being very opaque, very equivocal and vague about his injury, his status. And so I understand not wanting to disclose that, but if you're already at Staples Center, you might as well be in the trenches with your team. Right now, he's just being distant and away from the team. He's not even with them in the huddles. They can't see him during the timeouts. He could perhaps inspire them on the bench, and instead he's up in the suite. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand that at all. For the life of me, I still don't understand that, why the Clippers are approving of him to go do that when he's at Staples Center already. I understand not traveling for some of the road games. Totally understandable. But you're at Staples Center, you might as well sit in those huddles, be in the trenches with your team. So I really didn't like that look at all. Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning. A lot to talk about in the NBA, and coming up, I'm going to preview the Stanley Cup Finals between the Lightning and the Montreal Canadiens. That's coming up towards the end of the show, but sticking with the NBA, some big news out of Portland. The Portland Trail Blazers have officially hired the Clippers assistant coach, Chauncey Billups, to be their new head coach in Portland. He's obviously replacing Terry Stotts, who was there for 9 seasons. And he helped guide the Portland Trail Blazers to 8 consecutive postseason appearances, but only 1 conference finals appearance. So Billups, of course, and he agreed to a 5-year contract. The Blazers wanted to sign him long-term. The credentials speak for itself. Chauncey Billups played in the NBA 17 seasons, a 5-time All-Star, an NBA champion, won a championship with the Detroit Pistons in 2004, won Finals MVP when they beat the Lakers in 5 games. And he was a part of some really special teams, not only with Detroit, but with the Denver Nuggets reaching the Western Conference Finals and the New York Knicks. At one point, he had brief stints with other teams, but those were the more notable ones. So Chauncey Billups, his credentials are there. Now, let me first say this. And he won Finals MVP as well, in 2004. Now, let me first say this. I understand that today in society, we live in a cancel culture. If someone makes a sexist, racial remark, or they're involved in any sexual allegations, it's essentially a cardinal sin. And I completely condemn all that type of behavior, and I think that there should be punitive measures that are sent. So I'm all for that. But I do think that sometimes we're so caught up in cancel culture that sometimes we don't take a step back and try and approach different circumstances with not any understanding, but maybe just some context as far as age. Most of the time, these types of comments come at a young age. Obviously, we saw Kevin Hart, who wasn't able to host the Oscars because of a homophobic tweet that he sent out early in his comedy career. Most of the time, though, a lot of these individuals have hopefully learned from those previous transgressions when they were younger. And I think Kevin Hart certainly did. Now, Chauncey Billups was involved in, there were sexual assault allegations levied against him in 1997 with Ron Mercer, who was his teammate. So we understand that from a societal standpoint. That's why there's a little bit of controversy surrounding Chauncey Billups, and there was a lot of fan backlash about this hire was because of his involvement in that sexual assault case that took place in 1997. He wasn't charged with the crime, but he settled in a civil lawsuit. So from an optics perspective, from a fan's perspective, I understand why there's backlash for that hire. From a purely basketball standpoint, from an X's and O's, from a talent standpoint, who's the best fit in Portland? There's no denying that Chauncey Billups is a tremendous hire. Tremendous hire for the Portland Trail Blazers. I think that this guy is has an absolutely brilliant mind for basketball. He obviously understands the game. And when you look at the Portland Trail Blazers and you look at their roster, this is a team that should have achieved more success. This is a team that on paper had a better roster than the Dallas Mavericks. They should have had a better record than the Dallas Mavericks. To start this season off, I thought they had a better record than the Phoenix Suns. They didn't have as much team chemistry, but you've got an MVP caliber player in Lillard. You've got a borderline all-star in C.J. McCollum. You have really talented players in Yusuf Nurkic and Norman Powell and Robert Covington and Carmelo Anthony. You've got some guys where you should be able to make some noise. And the fact that this past postseason, they got bounced in the first round by the Denver Nuggets in 6 games without Jamal Murray, there's no question that a lot of the players could have stepped up surrounding Damian Lillard. But what that highlighted was a coaching discrepancy and a coaching disparity. Because as good as Mike Malone is as a coach, the Denver Nuggets shouldn't have beaten the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round. Talent-wise, the Portland Trail Blazers are way more talented than the Denver Nuggets, but it was coaching. A lot of that was coaching up the players. And Chauncey Billups, what you get in bringing a guy like Chauncey Billups in is not only a guy with tremendous cachet, played in the NBA 17 seasons, but what was his moniker? His moniker was Mr. Big Shot. So he can relate to Damian Lillard. He can resonate with Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard will respect him. Chauncey Billups has the type of presence that he commands respect when he walks into a room. He's got a big presence about him. He's got a low, deep timbre in his voice. He knows basketball. He played point guard for 17 years, so he's a great leader. He's a great motivator. Players respect him. He's good at galvanizing troops. He's good at orchestrating offenses. He's good at leading, not only from the bench, but when he was a player on the court. And when you look at the Portland Trail Blazers, the reality is they just need a new voice. I still think that on paper, they could extract more out of this team, especially defensively. This team has been atrocious defensively for years, and now you bring in a guy in Chauncey Billups who has been a part of some ferocious defensive teams. The 04 Pistons are one of the best defensive teams ever assembled, with the Wallace brothers and Tayshaun Prince, and Richard Hamilton and Chauncey Billups. They were nasty defenders. Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace. This was a really good defensive team. And it took heroic efforts from Kobe in 04 to force a 3 and over to force the game to overtime in game 2. A really good defensive team. I think that Chauncey Billups can extract a little bit more defensively out of this Portland Trail Blazers team than they're accustomed to. So I think that this is an absolutely tremendous hire as far as X's and O's, as far as basketball acumen, as far as what he brings to the game, and perhaps the type of messages that he can send to Dame, to CJ, to this team. I really like him as a head coach. I think he will work out perfectly. Now, here's the only issue. Here's the only issue with this hire is there are reports now that came out that because of all this backlash from fans and pressure to form a title contending team and a title contending roster, that Damian Lillard may have to request his way out of Portland. So the context here, as I just talked about with Chauncey Billups, is that Chauncey Billups was involved in a controversy. This was a controversial hire, involved in sexual assault allegations levied against him in 1997. And we know that Damian Lillard, once Terry Stotts was fired, had endorsed 2 coaches. Chauncey Billups was one, and Jason Kidd was the other. Now, Jason Kidd was also involved in controversy, was involved in a spousal abuse case in 2001 that led to him being divorced in 2007. Now, because of that, in the backdrop, Jason Kidd basically just withdrew his name from consideration of being a head coach. So Chauncey Billups became the clear-cut favorite. Now, the reason why this trickles down to Damian Lillard is because fans are saying, well, listen, if Damian Lillard endorsed both of these 2 guys, he must have had some knowledge of their previous transgressions. Now, Damian Lillard has come out and defended himself, saying, I didn't know anything about those allegations. I was 7 or 8 years old. I wasn't following the news. And this isn't about trying to decipher that or insinuate or intimate anything, because we don't know what Damian Lillard knew. But what we know is that there's been pressure now to try and distance himself from those reports, from that narrative of someone who supports and endorses a guy that had sexual assault allegations levied against him. So Damian Lillard is trying to remove his name from that and try and distance himself from that. But this is the thing that we know. And in life, there's always an impetus for change. Change doesn't just happen. There's something that sparks change. If you're in a relationship and you want to break up with someone, normally it's not the most latest transgression that's what leads to the breakup. There was something that took place earlier in your relationship that just exacerbated it. That was the crux of the issue. And then little things over time has kind of compounded it and exacerbated the issue to the point where now one more thing has put you off edge, has set you off edge. And that's normally what leads to the impetus for the breakup. It normally doesn't just happen on the latest event or the latest act. There's something that sparked that earlier on. And the reality is, if you're Damian Lillard, if you truly want out of Portland, we know that if he truly wants out of Portland, this isn't because of the Chauncey Billups hire, and this isn't because of the controversy that's surrounding it. This is just the latest reason, the latest fodder, and perhaps it could stoke some additional emotions and frustration at the organization, but that's not the reason that would be fueling his decision to leave. Now, the reason why maybe Damian Lillard, quite frankly, wants out and would have wanted out for years, as loyal as he is, as prideful as he is, as competitive as he is because at the end of the day, he looks at his roster and says, I cannot win with CJ McCollum as my second best player. I can't win with McCollum as my second best player, with Nurkic, with Covington, with Carmelo Anthony, with Anthony Simons, with Norman Powell, with Zach Collins being in and out of the lineup hurt every other year. I can't win with this lineup. I can't win with Enes Kanter coming off the bench. I can't do this myself. Those would be the reasons why Damian Lillard would legitimately want to leave Portland. All this news about Chauncey Billups, sure, it's valid, and perhaps it's the latest reason why he may want out of Portland, but at the end of the day, that's not the reason why he would want to remove himself and play elsewhere. No, he thinks he could compete for a championship somewhere else. He'd have more talent somewhere else. And as competitive as Damian Lillard is, and we have admired his reluctance to be a part of super teams, he always said that he always championed for players staying in their cities, and that if someone wants to come join him, he'll embrace them. But he wants to be the guy, and he wants to do it his way. He's prideful enough, he's competitive enough where he wants to win in his city. But if he wants to leave Portland to pursue a championship and have a greater and more realistic shot at winning a championship, it's not going to be because of this controversy surrounding Chauncey Billups and the backlash from the fans. It's because he will have come to his senses and will have realized that there are greener pastures for me and better opportunities to win elsewhere out of Portland. So the other piece of it is his contract isn't necessarily easy to move off of. Now, of course, we've seen that superstar players, and he's one of them as well, they carry tremendous weight and clout within organizations, have really strong influence over where they are traded. We just saw James Harden was able to trade his way out of Houston and be sent to his targeted destination with Brooklyn. So I don't know if there are specific places that Damian Lillard has eyed as a spot, but if he does, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could force his way there. That's the reality. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I haven't talked about this much this postseason, but I have been following the NHL playoffs. Obviously, the LA Kings had that tremendous stretch in 2012 and in 2014 when they came back in the first series against the Sharks, trailing 0-3 to ultimately win the Stanley Cup in 2012 and 2014. They had that brief little time of success, and so now I've kind of started to follow the NHL playoffs, and it's been really fun to see. And now we've got the Tampa Bay Lightning, the number 3 seed, taking on, in the opposite bracket, a 4 seed in the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the ways in which both of these teams have reached this point is what makes this matchup so fascinating. Because on the one hand, you've got the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just won the Stanley Cup last year. They were tremendous last season, had a really sensational run. And this postseason, they're coming off, first of all, they just outlasted the New York Islanders in 7 games in the conference finals to reach this point. That was a tremendous 7-game series. But in the first round, they beat the Florida Panthers in 6 games, and then they beat the Carolina Hurricanes, who were the number 1 seed in their bracket. In 5 games, they dismantled them. They just beat the Islanders in 7 games. And then you've got the Canadiens, who had to go through the Toronto Maple Leafs after trailing 1-3. They won the first game, lost 3 consecutive games, and then won 3 straight games, including a Game 7 on the road to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. Games 5 and 6 also went into overtime that they won, that they prevailed in. And then they followed that up by sweeping the Winnipeg Jets in 4 games. And then they just beat perhaps the best team in the NHL in the Las Vegas Knights in 6 games, winning a couple crucial games on the road. This was the 1 seed from the West in the Las Vegas Knights that they had to outduel to get to this point. So I'm really fascinated in the storylines surrounding both of these teams. Now, this is what I'll say. Both of these teams defensively are extremely good. These teams defensively, they've got 2 of the best goalkeepers in the league. Andrei Vasilevsky with the Tampa Bay Lightning has had the best saving percentage, 93.6% save percentage this postseason. And he's been fantastic for the Tampa Bay Lightning, just has perhaps been the most dominant goalkeeper throughout this entire postseason. Then Carey Price on the other end for the Canadiens with a 93.4 save percentage this postseason. So the defenses are there. The goalkeepers are stellar. What this series is going to come down to, and this is why ultimately I have the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup Finals over the Montreal Canadiens in 6 games, is because of the offense that we're going to see. And offensively, when you look at this team and this matchup, the Lightning are so much better offensively than the Canadiens. The Lightning, first of all, have 4 of the top 4 offensive players this postseason. In Kucherov, they've got Braden Point, who has, by the way, Braden Point, I've talked about this in Malkin's Moments, he leads the NHL in goals this postseason with 14. He had a stretch of scoring 9 straight goals in consecutive games. 9 consecutive games with at least 1 goal. He just snapped that streak in the 1-0 Game 7 win over the Islanders. Then you have Alex Killorn and Steve Stamkos. So this Lightning team, who won the Stanley Cup last year, trying to repeat for the first time since the Penguins did it in 2015 and 16-17 seasons, they're really good offensively. And they just continue to put pressure on opponents. They've scored 8 goals in a game this postseason. So that's where I kind of give the edge and the favor towards the Lightning, is that they've just got more playmakers, I think, that can put more pressure offensively than the Canadiens. The key to this series, though, to me, and if you're the Canadiens, is they've got to take advantage of the power play situations when they've got an advantage, because the Lightning have committed the most minor penalties this postseason out of any postseason team that's reached the postseason. They've committed the most minor penalties. They committed the second most minor penalties throughout the regular season in the NHL this year. So that's where the Canadiens will have their advantage. When they've got to man up, they've got to be able to exploit that and score in the power play. Because if they don't do that, those are going to be their best opportunities to jump on the Lightning. So that, to me, is the key. I think if the Canadiens can do that, they've got a good chance, but I like the Lightning in 6. Game 1 is tonight. I like Tampa Bay winning this game at home 2-1 in Game 1. but we'll see. I think this is going to be a tremendous Stanley Cup final, and I'm looking forward to seeing if Tampa Bay can make history. Again, that city has been at the forefront of sports for the last year, similar to the Lakers, although similar to Los Angeles. The Lightning won last year. The Lightning are back this year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl last year. The Tampa Bay Rays reached the World Series against the Dodgers last year. So there's a lot of great sports that are originating out of the city of Tampa Bay. So this playoff and this final should be a great one. Finally, my Malkin's moments. Final topic of the day. Favorite topic of the day. My Malkin's moments have a number of great ones for you. First of all, Harry English won the Travelers Cup Championship yesterday in dramatic fashion. He won in an 8-hole playoff yesterday to claim his 4th PGA Tour victory with the Travelers Championship. He outlasted Kramer Hickok in 8 playoff holes, which, by the way, in the 8-hole playoff is tied for the second longest in PGA history under the sudden death format. Really spectacular. Big shout out to Nelly Korda, who just won yesterday her first major golf championship as well at the Atlanta Athletic Club. She's now the new number 1 golfer in the world on the women's PGA Tour. She's been absolutely sensational. She just became the first female American in golf to reach the top ranking and the top spot since 2014. Her first major victory. Major shout out to Nelly Korda. Clayton Kershaw threw 13 strikeouts yesterday in the Dodgers win against the Chicago Cubs when they won 7-1. Clayton Kershaw has been a little bit up and down, but again, the southpaw, the former ace, and it's just great to see him kind of regain his form again, having that command over the pitches. And then finally, Diana Taurasi just scored her 9,000th point yesterday, and it took a while to reach that milestone for her, but she finally did. She was sitting on 8,994 points on May 21st and then missed significant time with a fractured sternum. She missed the past 5 weeks, so she was sitting on that. She became the first WNBA player to reach 9,000 points. She obviously is the WNBA's all-time leading scorer, Diana Taurasi. And she ended up actually dropping 25 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. She's been absolutely sensational. And this is what's impressive. So not only is she in her 17th season, first overall pick in 2004, last week she was also named to the U.S. Women's Basketball Olympic team for the 5th time in her career. We always talk about some of the greatest basketball players to have played, and especially in the NBA, you think about players like Candace Parker and Lisa Leslie and Maya Moore, but Diana Taurasi, whose name is already in there, she might be, Sue Bird, she might be Diana Taurasi, the best WNBA player ever. It's possible. She's been absolutely sensational, not only this season, but for the Phoenix Mercury. I mean, so much good is happening in Phoenix right now with the Suns on the precipice of reaching the NBA Finals, and now to have this news, it's just spectacular to become the first player ever to score 9,000 points. Just sensational. So big shout out to all the people that were on my Malkin's moments this week. Thank you so much for joining me. That's all the time that I got for you today. Every single Monday and Wednesday morning, Joe, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and all that jazz. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.